All right, thanks for joining us. We're live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. We begin tonight on the political scene with anticipation from the U.S. government that the 2023 general elections in Nigeria will go smoothly. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the U.S. is hoping that Nigeria will become a strong example for world's democracies when the nation heads to the polls. He says elections with real participation, which will send a very strong message about democratic resilience. Blinken has warned that democratic recession is growing around the world, but he says he is pleased that President Muhammadu Buhari is willing to respect term limits. He, however, believes there are areas that require improvement.
Meanwhile, former President Goodluck Jonathan says that there is an urgent need for leadership mentoring in Africa for the continent to sustain and develop its democracy. In his remark at the 2021 edition of the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation's Democracy Dialogue, the former Nigerian president said civil society groups must collaborate to help grow democracy in Nigeria.
Good governance is the main focus of discussion at this democracy dialogue. Former President Goodluck Jonathan believes that politicians in Nigeria and elsewhere in Africa need mentoring to learn and imbibe the values of democracy.
The democratic processes in Africa must be mentored and encouraged. And I would say that every process, every human process must be mentored. Democracy itself must be mentored by citizens of a nation or a state for us to get the kind of democracy we want. The civil society and the media must play a role in terms of shaping the practice of democracy. And the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation feel that we must also make these contributions to begin to put certain things to the system. How do we practice our democracy?
Keynote speaker Professor Abdullahi Batili, a former special representative of the UN Secretary General for Central Africa, said the African continent is faced with challenges of insecurity and bad governance.
In Africa, before our eyes, states are on the brink of collapse, not only in the Sahel, the Horn of Africa, Central Africa, Southern Africa. Millions of Africans are turned into refugees. Wars and destructions of home, increased poverty and inequality. It is up to the Africans themselves to find the solution to African problems in solidarity with each other in every nation and across the continent. Africa is in need for urgent search of a wise, capable, dedicated leadership.
Other speakers, including the Senate President Dr. Hamid Lawan, expressed their views on how the country can forge ahead, build a peaceful society, and entrench democratic norms.
Our major problem, amongst many, would be the suspicion between the different ethnic groups. Otherwise, why would somebody care or bother where the president comes from? Let the president come from anywhere. What we need is leadership that will give sense to the people, provide everything within the constraints of resources that the people need.
Democracy as a word cannot stand on its own. The operators of the institutions that facilitate the practice of democracy must be strengthened, must be deepened, must be given an opportunity to ventilate if we want to see the kind of progressive growth that we desire on the continent of Africa.
Unity is the primary hypothesis on which democracy stands in any state, which has chosen it as a form of government. This is because in a functional democracy, the people, in spite of their diversity in ideology, faith, tribe, and politics, have always united in a majority for most things to happen in the society, including leadership.
The 2021 Democracy Dialogue is organized by the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation to mark the former president's birthday.
All right, to discuss these issues further, we are now joined by Iyonu, the Executive Director of the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, as well as Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, a RISE analyst and lecturer at Baze University. Very warm welcome to Newsnight. Let me start with you, Anne. I mean, you had the U.S. Secretary of State there, Blinken, who again re-emphasizes the importance of democracy despite its dwindling fortunes and looking up to Nigeria as a country that can, help accelerate it, with more global acceptability. What are your thoughts along those lines, Anne?
Thank you very much for having me on the show, and a warm greetings to Nigerians. I kind of agree with the U.S. Secretary of State, because if you look at the issues on the continent now, most of the conflicts we are having as a result of unsatisfaction with leadership, where you have citizens being unsatisfied with the kind of leadership that their countries or their leaders are churning out. And so most of these citizens now find a way to either protest or there's the coup in Mali, there's the coup in Guinea because of unsatisfaction with leadership. So the challenges in the sub-region and the continent, mostly due to tenure elongation, because most people, either through what I like to call the judicial coup, manipulate the constitution and extend their tenure beyond what is legitimate. And then you have citizens saying, no, we can't accept this, and then it becomes an issue where there is conflict. So Nigeria, looking up to Nigeria now, it places Nigeria in a position of, again, big brother. So how do we do it? That's one of the reasons why we convened the dialogue we convened yesterday. If you agree with me that it is very evident that our unity and integrity as a country is under strain. And so we felt it's not enough for us to talk about the issues. Why don't we get people together, provide an independent platform, and have people come and have a conversation, a solution-oriented conversations. We know what the issues are, but how do we forge ahead? And so that's what informed the dialogue that we convened yesterday. It's our own way, it's our own way, like His Excellency, our founder always says, the former president, that nation building is a collective effort. So that's our own way of nation building, contributing to nation building. Absolutely. Well, and you know what, we'll come back to you, but let's quickly go to Abiodun Adeniyi, who is in our offsite studio. I do know that aside from the U.S. Secretary of State talking about democracy in recession, not just here in Africa, but all across the world, let's talk about the fact that if here in Nigeria, one major issue is voter apathy and insecurity, you will agree with me, has actually worsened this. But beyond that, how can we improve on, our democratic principles so that way we get more confidence, into the people to actually believe in democracy and what it stands for?
Well, it's central to our understanding that growing our democracy is a function of dialogue, a function of conversation, and bringing about understanding, not just on the part of the leaders, but on the part of the citizens. Yes, we know, like you mentioned, that voter apathy, is a global thing. It happens in most democracies, but the onus is always on the side of government, on the side of the electoral umpire, to sensitize the populace, create awareness on the need for them, not to rest on their hours in terms of performing their civic responsibility. But we need not also forget that growing democracy, yes, the former president has said it, that is a collective effort, but collective effort, central to collective effort is also leadership, which the senior president rightly alluded to, and how do we bring about the impact of leadership? It can only come essentially through good governance, because it is the absence of, or the feared absence of good governance that has led to the semi recession of democracy in pockets of African countries. And we need to also remember that even within the global circle, we are having threats, we're having a subtle challenge from some world economic powers, to downplay the importance of democracy, arguing that they have been able to achieve economic prosperity irrespective of the absence of the kind of democracy that we envisage, that we are learning from, especially from the Western plural world. So the conflicts are continuing, but what we need to do, and I think is what we are doing, first we have to continue to be dialogic, engaging ourselves, making us realize the importance of this system of government, because representation is actually a widely accepted governance system, and of course even autocracies, even dictatorships of sometimes like to create a semblance of representation by having some levels of parliament. We have adopted it in the last 22 years. We have grown in terms of longevity. All we need to do is to consolidate it. But to consolidate it as well, we need higher level of orientation, sensitization, so that we can have a commonality of purpose and the citizens can be completely galvanized, as the case could be.
All right, Prof. and Anne would be taking a short break, and when we return, we'll continue the discussion on sustaining democracy in Nigeria. Join us again. You're welcome back, and you're still watching Newsnight. We're live in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Christian Ogodo.
And I am Amaka Ude, of course, and Iyonu, the Executive Director of the Goodluck Jonathan Foundation, as well as Abiodun Adeniyi, Arise News Analyst, are both still in the studio. And we're having a conversation, really, sustaining democracy, not just in Nigeria, but across the African continent. And Anne, you will agree with me that one of the major issues here, especially on the continent, will be political interference when it comes to elections and all of that. Either you're seeing someone who's trying to use all of the influence to seek re-election, or even wanting to install a successor. But your principal showed a very good example in 2015. But how can we sustain this moving forward, and not just looking at the precedent now, just generally, so that way we can deepen our democracy?
I agree with you, but one thing I cannot overemphasize is the independence of the electoral management body. It has to be totally independent, as its name implies. INEC, or not just in Nigeria, everywhere. The electoral management body has to be independent so as to avoid leadership or avoid people imposing whoever they want to impose. And then you cannot underscore the importance of citizens' participation. Because when citizens are able to participate effectively and wholesomely in elections, it becomes very difficult for you to begin to manipulate results or impose. Because there's also the mandate watch, where you watch, after you vote, you watch your vote. You put an eye on your vote. So if the processes are clear, and it includes the whole participatory inclusion for citizens, and the fact that the electoral management bodies are independent, a lot of these things will reduce, because there will be trust in the electoral process. It will give the electoral process more credibility, and people will begin to trust the process and ultimately accept the results at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I mean, good place to anchor there. Let's go to our Overflow studios, where Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is. I think we all know that sustaining democracy goes beyond the word democracy. How have the institutions, that make for the good governance of a country, that helps entrench the principles of democratic culture in Nigeria, how have they fared? Good, bad, or just fair?
Well, I think very tough question, Christian. But what we need to understand is that democracy can also be like culture building. It's like we are undergoing a socialization process, you know, which is continuous. You know, it is not necessarily, you know, it's not necessarily a journey, but a destination. And we are continuing. We've continued. We started in 1999 with our recent start, and we have continued forward 22 years after. You know, so we are building on it as the case could be. But we also have to realize that it's essentially a multi-stakeholder affair, far beyond the umpire. In addition to the umpire, of course, we have security agencies, we have the judiciary, we have the executive, and we have the legislature. You know, so while one section or one arm of these parties, you know, is being conscientious or seemingly so, and other parts, other sections are seemingly reluctant, it can become very problematic. So we need all sectors, you know, of the conflation of parties to be on the same page. You know, otherwise there won't be a synergy at the end of the day. But who is it now that will galvanize the populace, that will galvanize the stakeholders involved in the building process? You know, no one else, you know, but the leadership from the center. Not necessarily presidential now, but including all those that are very close to the wielders of presidential powers, as the case could be. And of course, we've been talking about the question of sensitization. You know, sensitization can come, of course, through structural or unstructured education. Then what about voter literacy? You know, we are in a nation where we still have a large section of our populace, you know, still lack understanding. I do not want to use the word illiterate, you know, but how do we educate them, letting them know that, you know, democracy is an integrative system of government where they are otherwise supposed to be included, and that inclusion will come from where they're able to vote, exercise their franchise, you know, in a conscientious way without necessarily working because somebody has given them one kind of handout or the other. It's a process, and I dare say that we have not done badly in 22 years, you know, but in another 22 years, of course, we'll probably not be saying what we are saying now. We're discussing some other higher level of subject matters, you know, but of course, before we get there, we have to be painstaking, we have to be conscientious, you know, and we have to realize that it's also integral to nation building, which does not come just in one day, you know, but of course, after a while, you know, with the right leadership. Back to that question again.
All right, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi, yeah, Arise news analyst and senior lecturer in communication strategy at the Baze University, together with Anne Iyonu. She's the executive director of the Goodluck Foundation, Leadership Foundation. Thanks, both of you, for coming on Newsnight.